more and more it's been the case with Apple that we're entering uncharted territory in terms of lackluster performance and disappointments, right? This has been something that has been the case for a couple of years now. And one of the things that we'd like to see is better innovation out of Apple, better movement into new markets, right? Just recently, Amazon outdid it in terms of what it's doing with over-the-top IPTV. And so if we would see more innovation from Apple, some new drivers to get excited about, that would be something that could change JMP Securities from its relatively neutral stance on the stock right now.
I wonder if it's fair to look at it this way. Corey, Apple's revenue is 30 times higher than it was more than 11 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and really on the heels of two devices, right? I mean, the iPhone was one of the greatest successes, if not the greatest success in the history of technology, to be followed by the iPad, which had spectacular numbers. I mean, it's hard to imagine a company doing that again. But especially when we start to hear these stories about lack of innovation. And we didn't talk about this afterwards, but when we talked to George Zachary, was it 2 weeks ago, he had this kind of amazing comment about what he's hearing very specifically from people who are leaving Apple. And I had him cut this soundbite. Listen to what he had to say.
I know, I've heard from people at Apple that engineers that I've tried to recruit and are recruiting, that it's difficult to get a new project accepted at Apple. That in the Jobs era, if Jobs believe in the product, you got the resources. In the Tim Cook era, you have to put together a spreadsheet that shows how much this business is going to be worth, how big the market is, and will it materially add to Apple's revenue.
So, you know, you can connect that statement with the revenue growth or the year-over-year revenue growth that in the first or fourth quarter was, 70% 2 years ago, and now we're looking at possibly 0%. We'll see what the report is today. But even the 6% of last quarter on a year-over-year basis really shows a decline because those new drivers, as Alex was speaking about, aren't showing up.
Paul, are the alarm bells going off for you?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, they are. I mean, this has really been a disappointing period in terms of, we talked, I think, probably a year ago about, what was going to happen in 2013 in terms of new product launches, and none of them happened. Nothing happened. I mean, this has been a real black hole in terms of new product launches. So, I don't think it's that they weren't working on anything. I think it's that they repeatedly sort of stepped up and decided to walk products back and say, nope, we're not going to do TV, or nope, we're not going to launch a watch-type product sooner rather than later, and so on. And as a result, you've had this giant hole in terms of new product launches, and in technology, you just can't operate on those cycles because you have competitors introducing products much faster. Leave aside that it keeps you out of new markets where you could actually energize the growth. So I think this is a very, very nervous, difficult time for Apple and for Tim Cook in particular.
And Tim Cook did, to a certain extent, promise new product categories this year.
Yes.
Hasn't happened yet. Alex, what are you expecting in terms of new products this year? Is there going to be a larger phone? Is there going to be a watch? Is there going to be something more in TV?
Yes, you and I talked about this a year ago. Yes, we do think there's going to be...
We're still talking
about it. That's one of the problems. But we are going to see a larger phone this year. Yes, we do believe we're going to see an iWatch this year. The question is it enough? I mean, I think it'll be helpful, but we need to see something more transformative, more innovative, something along the lines of what Amazon perhaps is doing, or even with Netflix and original content, all of these things that could be done with Apple's titanic balance sheet, but it's not doing.
Paul, I hear you reacting there. Is it enough?
No, it's not nearly enough. As a matter of fact, like the watch product, I just find profoundly disappointing. It's a classic example of what Clay Christensen of Disruptive Innovation kind of fame would call sort of a sustaining innovation. It's kind of over-obvious, right? It's sort of an extension of what you've been doing. And not only that is an extension, it's an extension into a marketplace that, quite honestly, most of which doesn't care. Where there are markets out there, the example of over-the-top programming, the examples of television, where there are paying customers right now who hate everything out there. And so these are the places where Apple should be going, not into sort of these minor tweaks on their current form factors. It's very disappointing.
Corey, talk a little bit about the marketplace for us and put it into context of what Apple is up against. We were talking about Xiaomi a bit earlier. They want to go global. They're outselling Apple in China, and they're not the only ones.
Well, there's two aspects of this, right? One is sort of Apple's a victim of its own success just by comparative numbers. I mean, the first quarter the iPad was on the market, it did $2 billion in revenues. But at that time, Apple was only doing about $15 billion in revenues. So it had a substantial impact right from the bat. Well, now the company is doing nearly $60 billion, $58 billion in revenues last quarter. So a $2 billion addition to revenues, what might be lovely, but it is a drop in a much bigger bucket all of a sudden. So then add to that their decisions about what to do in the competitive environment when they're looking at companies coming with lower margins and smarter phones, where Xiaomi's willing to come in and take a lower margin. Yes, Apple seems to be willing to lose market share to take a lot of profits, but increasingly losing market share, they start to lose their ability to define what's going to happen next in this consumer technology.